And Brad Holmes got things going a little bit yesterday with this conversation on what to look forward to in this draft.
Absolutely. JB, can you play the BPA versus needs cut for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just curious about the BPA versus need conversation when maybe a guy is.
I love need.
Let's say
You guys
a guy
know me.
Is clearly a guy you evaluated very, very highly, but there's an overlap with a guy in your roster where it's tough to see how you get both of them on the field. Like, how do you handle that as an evaluator when that guy's the best player, but maybe can't help you in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and we've had those discussions. I think the interesting thing, Justin, is that, and this is where I not get annoyed, but this is why I sometimes don't understand the whole need thing, because when each season ends, it's going to be something else. Like, another player's contract's going to end. Another player, unfortunately, might be coming off an injury. And, like, it's going to be something different every single offseason. So if you're trying to chase the what happened last season of, oh, man, this guy's contract's in. Oh, if you're trying to chase, oh, well, this guy got an injury. Like, you're just kind of getting into a cycle that I think is a little bit dangerous to get into. So that's why I've been more of a, just get the best player, because even, like, look, we loved Rakestraw, and unfortunately he just wasn't as healthy, but so he wasn't able to help as much last year. But, like, we're real excited and looking forward to what he's going to be able to bring this year. So there is just, and I said before, there's just a level of patience that you just have to play. But when you start chasing need, it's like, well, that need might make sense for right now at this time, but what we make these picks for future investments. And I know we live in a society that everything is right now, boom, right now. And I understand it too, just from, when a player gets drafted and so much, fascination is made about the draft, and, people are excited about it. People want to see it right now. And, they don't want to wait and be patient, but there's just patience. I mean, it's no different than when we made that massive jump to get Jameson Williams. He was coming off his injury. We knew maybe he could play a little bit late in the season, but we weren't planning on it, So yeah, I just got to play the patient. But I'm just, I think you can get trouble chasing needs sometimes, and then you're dependent on a rookie that, you do the best you can, but nobody has a crystal ball, so it could be a tough world to live in.
Man, Brad Holmes, you want to say, he's one of those guys that just stays true to form, period. That's just it. And when you hear him talk, I'm actually comfortable with what he's doing, because I do believe he has this recipe to help the Lions be able to stay within contention right now, but also be able to provide the flexibility you need down the road, whether it's cap space, whether it's controllability of a young asset, or whether it's a young asset developing later. Remember, when I heard him talking about this, the first name that popped into my head was Jameson Williams. And at the time, a lot of people said, why are they going with the wide receiver? And then he didn't play right away. And then last year we realized Jameson Williams is somewhat of a need then. And they didn't have to necessarily utilize or use a capital during that opportunity to at a wide receiver number 2 type role. Instead, that draft pick that they got several years back developed into that role. And when I do hear him talking about that type of stuff, I hope that when you hear him mention names like Ennis Rakestraw, that all of the assessment that went into Ennis Rakestraw by Brad Holmes, that we see a similar type of a jump, a little bit faster. But I'm hoping that we do see that type of jump, because some of these guys do pan out. Not all of the draft picks are going to be hits. But I do appreciate when you look at some of the example, like a Jameson Williams, I do appreciate the approach. I do believe it helps his Lions team be able to keep that window open just a little bit longer.
Your mind goes to JMO, and that makes sense. My mind actually goes straight to the 2023 draft. Brad Holmes said some things in this soundbite that were actually very profound to me. I really locked in and listened in a way that I always listen, but this one, when I heard a couple of keywords, I'm like, okay, let me really dissect this. I listened to this multiple times. I think the biggest takeaway from this segment is that you don't really know what you need all of the time. There are a lot of variables in the NFL. People get signed, people get cut, people get traded, people get hurt. You just never know. And the 2023 draft, I think, is the biggest encapsulation of it all. Going into the draft, every single person, even at this network pretty much, and even the pundits were all like, defense, defense, defense. Jalen Carter, Jalen Carter, Jalen Carter. And Jalen Carter, he's a damn good player, and that's who I wanted the Lions to pick. But we didn't really know the need that Jahmyr Gibbs was until it materialized. Because at the time of the draft, at the day of the draft, Jamal Williams had signed elsewhere. The Lions had signed David Montgomery, and they still had DeAndre Swift for what they thought was one more year. So you thought maybe you could run it back this next season with DeAndre Swift and David Montgomery. But what happened on draft night, we all know. The Lions traded back for Jahmyr Gibbs, and they traded DeAndre Swift to the Eagles. So when it all shook out, you had Gibbs, a promising rookie, and David Montgomery, somebody who really isn't a bell cow. He's damn good, but as that bruising complementary back, that's how he can be best. So Jahmyr Gibbs actually was more of a need than any of us even knew, and now he's a superstar. Kind of same with Jack Campbell, because the previous season, we saw that Anzo took a leap, Malcolm Rodriguez had a heck of a rookie year, and Derek Barnes showed some improvements. And also, there was once a time where Jack Campbell was not thought of as a first-round caliber talent. It was thought of that you could get a lot of value in later rounds. There were a lot of linebackers that went in the third round, like Diane Henley, Trenton Simpson, Demarion Overshone, Drew Sanders. Jack Campbell was often lumped in with those guys. I know it's hard to remember now, but that was the thought. You didn't need a linebacker in the first round, but obviously the Lions never really saw Malcolm Rodriguez as a long-term starter. And we saw this season when Jack Campbell was the only linebacker to stay healthy. So sometimes needs present themselves through injuries as well, as I mentioned before. And the same thing with Sam Laporta. Because Sam Laporta, this is one thing where I kick myself in retrospect. Tight end was obviously a need at the time. I know that Lions fans, I'm going to do this again. Brock Wright, Shane Zylstra, James Mitchell, most touchdowns by a tight end in Lions history. That was never the answer. Everybody knows that. And there was a lot of context to that because 3 of those touchdowns came from TJ Hawkinson when he was there. And 3 of those touchdowns were Shane Zylstra, a 7-yarder, a 3-yarder, and a 1-yarder in the Carolina game. Obviously, you needed a tight end. I was more of a Michael Mayer guy. I'm kicking myself in retrospect also. But you needed a weapon like Sam Laporta more than you even thought you did. And of course, with Brian Branch, it was the perfect combination of just need and best player available. How the hell is he still available at a 48, and that need was necessitated even more because of the C.J. Gardner-Johnson injury. So the 2023 draft, I think, was the lesson to all of us that needs often present themselves in mysterious ways.
Definitely. You're cooking up there, man, because you're exactly right. The Brad Holmes ways continue to prove itself right. So if anybody talks about aspects of misses, that's where with the names you rattled off, and you can go back to even some of the earlier draft picks, that's where I'm just like, you know what, let's rock. Especially when you pick an Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th
Well, that's
round.
the thing. Dead serious, in the 2021 draft, you could not have picked a better player at that position than Amon-Ra St. Brown. You could literally look at it. I think there were 2 Pro Bowlers drafted after him, and they were Talanoa Hufanga and Trey Smith. Amon-Ra St. Brown was the best possible player you could have picked at that position. And you can also argue that Kirby Joseph was the best possible player that you could have picked at the 97th overall pick in 2022, because the only real competitions after that are Brock Purdy, which is a little bit different, Kyron Williams, already got Gibbs earlier, and Deron Bland. And since Kirby Joseph has been drafted, he has the most interceptions of any player in the league with 17. Next closest is 14, by the way, and a first-team All-Pro. So, but those were the drafts more where you just needed to accumulate talent. Yeah. 2023 was where you had to be a little bit more nuanceable, and Brad Holmes was more nuanceable than we ever even really knew. And before we go to other clips, because there's more, I want to get Chase in on this. What are your thoughts when hearing what Brad Holmes had to say in his press conference, at least that soundbite?
I mean, it sounds like he's just going to continue to just, make the best decision, of like what's available, which is all you can ask for. At least all I can ask for is like, because like he said, at the end of the day, like, we're going to be in the same position again next year, and we're going to have new free agents, new pending guys who are like pending extensions, and it's going to be decisions to be made on like who stays, who goes, and who's going to be part of the long-term future of the roster, and so. I'm all for BPA. I think he's like he says, like you draft for need, you're putting yourself in a position, where you're forcing your hand in some ways, and you're relying on rookies. So, I'm looking forward to next Thursday and just seeing whatever he decides to do over the course of the weekend to add some talent to this team.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I see Ed O'Neill here though, kind of on a little bit of different side of this. He says, "So is what I'm hearing, we should be okay if we refuse to address the edge once again." And I don't know. Like, for me personally, it's this hard battle between what I believe is a need and the fact that Brad Holmes has only increased every single year. This Lions team, the win totals, the expectations, it only goes up. So that's where the conundrum for me is just like, well, it really looks like we need edge help. It really looks like we need pass rush help, especially when we talk about what we saw in the playoffs and especially in that Super Bowl. But I remember sitting here in that chair that Flannel's in on that side of the desk, filling in on the heavies for one of the legendary heavyweights, Spinny, hosting with Easy. KG was just getting started with sounds over in that booth. And I remember sitting here and we were talking about the fact that at the trade deadline, they got to go out there and get a pass rusher. And they wound up there and got maybe Bruce Irvin for a game, that legendary Uncle Bruce Irvin game where supposedly him and Flannel had some backdoor deal. That was a
Don't injure Derek Carr, you might not win that game. But we belabor the point. Go on.
Yeah, we belabor, and that's what I'm saying. It's like I thought, and we all clamored for it, and then guess what? They went out there and they busted through a lot of our expectations. People said if they make no real move at this deadline, they'll win one game max. And instead, they found themselves in a position in which they probably should have punched their ticket to the Super Bowl. And so that's where it's like, Ed, man, you one of the real ones. You one of the OGs. Word to Ed O'Neill in the chat. But I don't know. I feel like address edge. Y'all know how we feel.
That's another one, though, that also has a complicated legacy because, in my opinion, a lot of people will disagree with me on this, is that the Detroit Lions didn't make that big move, and they won 2 playoff games. And I know a lot of people thought that they wouldn't even be able to do that without help at edge. But the other side of the coin is, whether you like him or not, Chase Young did impact the 49ers. And maybe they don't get as far as they do without him. I suspect they probably do, but that was a good move by them. And relative to the Lions' expectations, there really wasn't anything wrong with not adding. But I want to also say something to what Ed O'Neill had to say, because I actually don't mind it at all, because I am still someone, probably one of the few people left on this island, that says that the Lions should have never released Zadarius Smith. He should still be here right now. I want him here. I want him to be signed back. I think they do need to add more. And this is where I'm going to be a level of fair that some people in the chat are really going to appreciate. The edge rushing position seems like the biggest need, and I think it is a huge need, by the way. I don't think what I'm about to present is going to happen, but I have to present this side. What if Marcus Davenport gives you, let's just say, at least 12 healthy games, and his pressure rate is at 11.4%, which is what it has been over the past 3 years, although albeit in a small sample size. If Marcus Davenport gives you that and is available for the playoffs, plus Josh Paschal, which I'm not counting on, by the way, is like, it's my contract year, I want a future in this league, I want a future with the Lions. He surprises everybody and has like a 6 or 7 sack season, and of course Aiden comes back healthy and does what he does. Then even a position like edge, and it seems unfathomable at this point to most, isn't as big of a need as we think that it is now. There are just so many variables, and I actually thought Brad Holmes, and I'm not a Brad bot by any means, but I thought that the way that he framed a lot of that in that clip was brilliant, actually, and very well said.
Yeah, I see Denver Brady said Brad already talked about Big Z. Yep, and we know we speculated yesterday as well in a couple segments on this show that we do believe that there has to be a number out there. If you already talked, Brad Holmes already knows what he can and can't do. And it probably just allows either Big Z a couple things. If there's a better deal out there that can set him up better as an older player, Brad Holmes is going to be happy for him, even if he would love to be able to retain his services. But, two, sometimes with these older players, you see them usually, or sometimes, especially if they're the dogs, sometimes they sign late in the summer. That's what they do. You'll see them skip a couple training camp sessions and all this type of stuff, and then you see them sign up late in that session. So I wouldn't, I want him here. I'm all for that sentiment of Big Z. I think we've all beat that drum like in unison on this show, as well as a lot of people out there. But that's why I'm so conflicted, because how do we balance what looks like a need for us with the fact that this team just went 15-2 with what, 22, 23 injured players, and how many went on the IR? Like, how do we balance that? That's the component, because I feel where Ed's at,
yeah,
but then how do we show? If I show it to Brad, he's just gonna be like scoreboard, and it's just like,
yeah,
okay.
but there's always something that you can do when you don't win it all, and I understand that injuries played a big factor in it. It's just, I'm never going to, and trust me, I gave Brad Holmes so many flowers for what he said and was really trying to understand the psychology of him. I will not be a blind follower of someone like a GM or even a coach until they cash one in. And I understand that Brad Holmes wasn't necessarily the reason why the Lions didn't win the Super Bowl last year. Far from it. It's just the philosophy of it all. You need to take that next step in order to be a true made man. We can't be looking at this in terms of Lions history. We have to be looking at this as a team that if they don't cash one in the Holmes and Campbell era, that it's a massive failure. And I think they will, by the way, but there's always something that you could do to tweak things just a little bit. But Brad Holmes, amongst all that, has built himself into being, I think, at worst, the fourth best GM in the NFL, and at best, like top three.
this is I can't wait to hear the other comments.